Welcome to the Vitality Equation, exploring research in health and well-being one paper at a time. We're diving into some fascinating stuff today, the emerging role of the epigenome in stress resilience. It's like how our experiences can actually change our DNA expression, which is just wild to think about.
Yeah, it's absolutely mind-blowing. When you think about genetics, we've always been taught that it's this kind of fixed code, right? And now we're realizing that it's way more dynamic. Like our environment and our lifestyle aren't just affecting us, they're impacting how our genes are read, and that's so different.
Totally. It's not just what you're born with, but also what you go through that really shapes you. And the idea that those changes in gene expression can actually then affect our long term health outcomes, that's pretty profound. I mean, it kind of puts a different spin on the whole nature versus nurture debate.
Right. It's like nature provides the piano and nurture dictates the music you play, something like that. So, epigenetics is the sheet music that directs the notes, and our experiences, our diet, our mental state. They're all conductors leading the orchestra. It's more holistic and connected than I ever imagined.
I like that analogy. The conductor of the orchestra, that's perfect. I've been reading up on studies about childhood adversity and how it can leave these epigenetic marks that increase the risk of mental health issues later in life. Things like anxiety and depression, even PTSD, it's a very real and scary implication.
It's really sobering, especially when you look at research that connects early stress exposure with heightened inflammation markers and other physiological changes linked to chronic illnesses. Like it's almost setting up the body for a rough ride down the road. But on the flip side, that also means there's incredible potential for us to influence this stuff too, right?
Exactly. That's what gets me so excited. It's not like we're doomed if we had a rough start. The fact that these epigenetic changes can be reversible or modulated is so empowering. It means that by consciously making positive lifestyle choices, like managing our stress, eating nutrient-rich foods, and cultivating mindfulness, we can actively reshape our own health trajectory. And it's not just about the physical, it's about the mental and emotional well-being too, all interconnected.
Yes, and it highlights how essential early intervention and supportive environments are. But it also brings into the forefront this aspect of personal agency, this potential to rewrite part of that narrative by changing our current environment and how we respond to things. Like you were saying, that mindfulness piece is key. Like if we're stuck in a negative thought loop or a chronic stress response, we can actually use cognitive behavioral techniques to essentially, I don't know, redirect our epigenetic responses.
Absolutely. And I'd add the importance of a solid physical foundation to that as well. Things like regular exercise and good quality sleep. These are not just some vague good habits. They're fundamental for modulating our stress response and our internal chemistry, influencing those epigenetic markers in a positive way. It's a three-prong approach, I guess: mind, body, environment.
You both hit on key points there. It's almost like we're not just at the mercy of our past. We're the drivers of our own epigenetic destiny now. Think about the research on meditation and its impact on reducing stress hormones like cortisol. Those directly influence epigenetic modifications. And it's not just a woo-woo thing. There's actually hard science behind it. Like some studies show changes in the methylation patterns of DNA after a regular meditation practice, showing that we can actively downregulate certain gene expressions related to stress.
Yeah, and it's fascinating how that connects with what we see with CBT. When you learn to reframe negative thoughts or challenge maladaptive beliefs, you're essentially teaching your brain to respond differently to stressors. That shift in cognitive appraisal can actually lead to measurable changes in the body's physiological response, which then can, through that pathway, affect the epigenome. It's this powerful feedback loop between the mind and the body.
And that's where the importance of exercise comes in. It's not just about getting those endorphins pumping. Physical activity also stimulates the release of neurotrophic factors that are good for your brain. Plus, it helps regulate inflammation and improves sleep quality. All these things are critical for stress resilience. So if you're looking for a non-invasive, effective way to improve your epigenetic profile, a good, consistent exercise routine is an absolute must, along with the mental stuff.
It makes complete sense. And it's so empowering to think that we have all these accessible tools at our fingertips. Like, it doesn't have to be some hardcore, expensive intervention. We're talking about things like mindful breathing, gentle walks in nature, a nourishing meal with friends, just these small, intentional actions throughout our day that can collectively have an enormous impact on the expression of our genes. It's not an overnight thing, but a marathon. But that's so exciting to know.
And what I find really interesting is how this research applies to broader societal issues as well. Think about communities that experience systemic inequalities and chronic stressors. Understanding epigenetics can really help us understand the intergenerational impact of that kind of trauma. It's not just that someone is born into poverty, but that the stress of poverty is actively altering the gene expression of whole communities, and those changes can be passed on. It's a huge public health issue that needs attention.
Yeah, and it calls for comprehensive approaches beyond individual interventions. We're talking about creating environments that promote well-being at a societal level. Things like access to green spaces, safe communities, nutrition programs, and better education. Addressing socioeconomic disparities is just as crucial as addressing individual lifestyle choices because the two are so interwoven. It's not fair to say just go to the gym when someone is working 3 jobs just to put food on the table.
It's like we can't expect individuals to thrive if the environment is stacked against them. We need to foster systems of support and equity to create real, lasting change. It's not about blaming individuals, but about empowering communities. And it's also about raising awareness so people know that they aren't doomed by their past, that there's so much they can do to reshape that narrative. The power of information is huge. Just knowing what's possible can be a massive catalyst for people.
Absolutely. It goes beyond just educating individuals. It's about creating a culture that nurtures mental and emotional resilience. That includes breaking the stigma around mental health and creating safe spaces for people to talk about their struggles. CBT and other therapeutic approaches need to be more accessible, and we need to train more professionals to meet the growing need for support. It's not just about the individual, it's about creating a supportive fabric in society.
And also, making sure access to physical activity is equitable is important. We need better parks, bike paths, community centers, and more accessible gyms. Not everyone can afford to pay a lot for these things, so we need to make it a priority to ensure that everyone has the opportunity to move their bodies and improve their health. And alongside this, we also need to address the systemic issues that affect sleep, such as work shift patterns, stress, and financial pressures, so that there are not barriers to getting proper rest.
It really is a multifaceted issue, isn't it? The more I learn about epigenetics, the more I realize that it's not just about what happens in the lab. It's about how we live our lives, how we interact with each other, and how we structure our societies. It's like this whole interconnected system where every element is affecting and changing the others.
Yeah, and it forces us to rethink a lot of our conventional health paradigms. It's not enough to just look at the genes or the symptoms. We need to consider the whole context, the person, their experiences, their environment. And that's challenging because it requires us to adopt a more holistic perspective. And that can be very overwhelming, but also very exciting because of the possibility it creates.
It also means that research has to be more transdisciplinary. It's not just about geneticists working in silos. We need sociologists, psychologists, environmental scientists, all working together to understand the complex interplay of these factors. And we need to invest in research that looks at the whole person, not just a singular condition or illness. The silo approach just doesn't cut it anymore.
I mean, it's mind-blowing that our cells are literally listening to everything we experience. Like the food we eat, the thoughts we think, the air we breathe. All of that is sending signals to our DNA. And the way that DNA responds is then influencing our physical and mental health down the line. It's this constant feedback loop between internal and external worlds.
And that feedback loop is exactly where we have so much potential for positive change. And it makes you appreciate the importance of self-awareness even more. Recognizing patterns of negative thoughts or stress triggers is the first step towards making conscious choices to interrupt those patterns and redirect. Our epigenetic responses. It's like taking control of the steering wheel instead of being a passenger on autopilot.
It highlights the value of preventative health too. It makes me think more about the long game, the cumulative effects of our daily choices. It's not just about quick fixes or fad diets. It's about building a sustainable lifestyle that supports our overall well-being, prioritizing sleep, engaging in regular physical activity, managing our stress. These aren't just nice to haves, they're essential for long-term health. We have to make these part of the foundation of our daily life.
I think what makes this so exciting is that it makes health something much more personal, doesn't it? It isn't some prescribed one-size-fits-all prescription. It's about understanding your own unique genetic and epigenetic landscape and making choices that align with your own unique needs and goals. It's like we have this amazing opportunity to become the architects of our own wellness and health. It's definitely not about following any guru or trend, but more self-guided, I guess.
Yes, absolutely. And it's about empowering individuals with the knowledge and the tools to make informed choices that are right for them. And that's not about perfection, it's about progress. It's about developing strategies and skills that enable us to be more resilient to life's inevitable challenges and being forgiving of ourselves when we don't quite reach perfection.
Yeah, and I think it's also about understanding that these changes take time and consistent effort. It's not a quick fix, it's a journey. And it's a journey that is so worthwhile because the positive impact of these changes ripple out across all aspects of our lives: physical health, mental clarity, and emotional well being. It's all connected. And the research now is showing it, which is mind blowing, isn't it?
It really is. So, if we're talking about future research directions, I'm particularly interested in seeing more studies that explore the specific epigenetic changes associated with different types of mindfulness practices, and also how the length and intensity of the meditation sessions impact the level of change. I'd also love to see more focus on creating evidence-based, personalized programs based on individual differences.
From my perspective, I think there's huge potential in investigating the efficacy of integrating CBT with other lifestyle interventions, like mindful movement and nutritional guidance, to create more holistic treatment protocols. I'd also like to see further research on the long-term effects of early intervention programs on epigenetic trajectories, and whether these early interventions can prevent long-term negative impacts. And we need more specific focus on the mechanism of cognitive processes influence epigenetics.
And I think it would be incredibly beneficial to see more longitudinal studies that track the epigenetic changes in individuals who adopt regular exercise and consistent sleep habits. And also, if different types of exercise, like H-height versus yoga, have different impacts on the epigenome. And what is the most effective form for each individual and their lifestyle? And we also need to think about the impact of sleep disruption on epigenetics and the best ways to mitigate these negative impacts. Sleep seems to be the glue that holds it all together.
That's such a great point, sleep. I think sometimes we overlook the importance of a good night's rest. And yeah, longitudinal studies are crucial because that's where we see the real impact. It's so much more than just snapshots. We need the big picture.
And what I find really interesting is that the field of epigenetics is still so relatively new. There's so much more to uncover and so many different avenues of research to explore. It's an exciting time to be involved, and just think about where this can go in the future. It is definitely something I want to follow closely.
Definitely. And that means that we need to be open to integrating new ideas and methods and thinking outside the box. And also being really inclusive in who does the research, as that will bring different perspectives and questions to the table. Because we are all unique, and that is how we solve complex problems. This is the key to a better and healthier future.
Absolutely. Well, that is all we have time for today. This has been a fascinating discussion, and it really shows how much we're learning about how we affect our own health. The power is definitely within us to change and for the better. Thank you for joining us, and we will catch you on the next episode.